address at GHS Housing Estate. From now to 31st January 2023, we are offering you an amazing 5% buyer's discount on all purchases on our expandable 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom detached homes at Cochrane Villa, Pokwase, just 5 minutes drive from the interchange. The Mayflower and the new Hazel Courts at Kuntusi, 20 minutes drive from Achimotamo. Beautiful homes in a serene and gated community with flexible payment plans available. Call us now on 0544 347 980 or 0544 347 981. GHS Housing Estates. View it, love it, own it.
Hi guys, this is your friend Uruj from SendWave. SendWave is a money transfer app that is used by people all over the world to send money to their loved ones in Africa. With SendWave, you can send money to Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And the best part is, SendWave is absolutely commission-free. Our exchange rates are excellent. You can see for yourself by checking them out on our website. So how do you use SendWave? SendWave is an app that you can download onto your phone from the App Store or Google Play Store. The app is free to download. After downloading it, just open the app and enter your name, email, and phone number. That's it. You're good to go. Make sure you use the promo code SR. S for Starr, R for Radio. This promo code will give you £5 free credit to send to Africa on your first transaction. Your money will be delivered to your recipient within seconds. Feel free to call me on 0749 7377 647 at any time. I'll be happy to tell you all about SendWave and help you in any way I can. Remember to use the promo code SR for £5 free credit. Medase.
Hi everyone, it's your girl BB Clement, the author of How to Go From Employee to Entrepreneur and the host of your weekly business show, BB Means Business, the show where we discuss everything you ever wanted to know about business but you were afraid to ask. How do I start my business? How do I raise the finance? How do I grow my business? Where am I going to find my customers? Join me every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. on Starr Radio UK to get all the information and tips that you need to become a successful entrepreneur and become financially free. Remember, don't let life dictate to you. Rather, put your signature on life.
Welcome back to the program Starr Radio UK, your favorite African and Caribbean radio station in London. Now 11:37 the time, and it is the Wednesday edition of the morning show. Now we're going to be moving on quickly because we don't have enough time on our hands. This morning, so we're going to be moving on swiftly. Okay, so now I was talking about the Tigrayan issue there, but that is some of the headlines making the rounds there, as I will have to be moving very fast to be able to capture all the stories that is making the rounds there as well. Now, Uganda, 2 accused over deadly stampede granted bail is one of the stories. The promoter of a deadly New Year Eve event on the concert MC appeared in court Tuesday, January 10. They were granted bail after a hearing. Well. A sad one there. And the Uganda court removes key part of controversial internet. Let me bring you that law, and then we will move on from that part of the world. Now, the story says that Uganda's constitutional court on Tuesday removed the key part of a controversial internet law which rights groups charged was aimed at stifling free speech. It was aimed at stifling free speech. That's what they are saying there. Now, it says that a section of the Computer Misuse Act made it an offense for anyone to use electronic communication to disturb or attempt to disturb the peace, quiet, or right of privacy of any person with no purpose of legitimate communication. That's a mouthful. Now, Justice Kenneth Kakuru, announcing the ruling of the court's five-judge panel, found the article in the 2011 law contravened the East African country's constitution and was now void. But the question is, Weren't they there? Didn't they see all that? And when the government put those things in place, impeding information sharing during the what do you call it, the election that took place and everything that went on there? Weren't they there? Didn't they see it? Okay, then. Now let's move on. Now I find that the impugned section is unjustified as it curtails the freedom of speech in a free and a democratic society, Kakuru said, describing it as overly vague. Well, it termed it overly vague. But what has the government done so far pertaining to that? What has the government done so far pertaining to that story? Are they going to react to that? Are they going to try to say, no, we want to come back and put it back on? Now, rights groups have complained about the communication law as a way of the government to curb freedom of expression and crack down on opponents of veteran President Yoweri Museveni. The government has yet to say if it will appeal the ruling, which was hailed by rights campaigners. This is not only victory for us as petitioners, but to human rights defenders in general, said Andrew Karamagi, who was one of those behind the legal challenge first filed in 2016. So this and a lot more coming your way from Starr Radio UK. It is your favorite African and Caribbean radio station in London, and it brings the time now to 11:41. My apologies to those of you who were on the Facebook, the YouTube. There was a bit of interference there, and therefore we might have lost the communication. But it is all up, back and running. So if you want to join in, feel free to do so and share your take with us. It is all coming your way from Starr Radio UK. It is your favorite African and Caribbean radio station in London. I know a few of you who were still watching. Okay. All right. Those of you on the YouTube, our channel, my apologies there. But we started the second stream, so it is working nicely. If you want to go back and follow us from there, if not, the Facebook is, Twitter is as well. Stay tuned and don't you go away. Okay, now moving on straight. The Northern Regional House of Chiefs give Karaga region 48 hours to vacate Karaga Palace. Interesting. It says the Northern Regional House of Chiefs has given the former regent of the Karaga, Na Mahama Sumani, 48 hours to vacate the Karaga Palace to pave way for Na Abdullahi Natungma, the paramount chief of the Karaga traditional area, to occupy the scheme. The ultimatum comes after the three-member committee on Tuesday, January 10, unanimously upheld Na Abdullahi Natungma, the petitioner, as the legitimate paramount chief of Karaga. The committee, chaired by the paramount chief of Kumbung Na Alhaji Idrisu Abu, with the Bapab Na Adam Na Togma as Sabob Na John Bowen Madhir as members, slapped a fine of 5,000 Ghana cedis against the embattled regent, who was the respondent. The Karaga scheme is one of the three gate schemes to the Dagbon kingship, the other being Savulugu and Mion, and is occupied by only sons of previous kings of the Dagbon state. In 2020, as part of efforts to fully implement the roadmap to peace in Dagbon Pact, agreed by both the Abudu and Adani royal families, and in consonance with an earlier ruling of the Supreme Court that a ruling family should occupy one gate scheme while the family waiting occupied the other two. Yana Abukari II, who hails from the Adani family, and Skin Na Abdullahi Natungma from Abudu family as the paramount chief of Karaga. Now this was after he had skinned the late Mion Lana Abdullahi Muhammadu, another Abudu, to the gate skin of Mion, while the former regent of Dagbon, Yona Abdullahi Yakubu Andani, who hails from the Andani family, was skinned the gate skin of Savelugu. Now the decision to skin Na Abdullahi Natungma as the Karaga chief did not go down well with the regent of Karaga, who is in counter move and skinned himself as the Karaga chief, and has since continued to occupy the palace. The move was widely condemned across Dagbon, as many saw it as a move that undermined the authority of the Dagbon overlord. Now there's a problem there. The issue is, will he vacate the palace peacefully, or at times whoever is, the respondent there, in this case the regent of Karaga, would have loved to just back off or something, but his supporters and the people around him will be urging him on. But I pray and hope that this will not result in a war or battle once again, because we know what happens there. And you and I know exactly. Then they'll go on. This one says that one says that. The next moment, lives are lost. But what do you think? So coming your way from Starr Radio UK, it is your favorite African and Caribbean radio station in London, bringing the time now to 14 minutes to 12. Okay, let's move on straight to some other stories making the rounds this morning on Starr Radio UK. Now, when it comes to the National Cathedral, what do you think about it? It's a nice edifice. It's been built for God. But when it comes to biblical scholars or clerics, name them. Maybe I'm a bit naive there, right? Now, Jesus, when he met the Samaritan woman at the well, and the woman was questioning why the Jews and those in Samaria, they don't get on. They are not supposed to be palace, though they are all originally from Jacob, right? Okay. And then Jesus was telling them why because of that they don't go to Jerusalem to go and worship and do all that stuff. Then Jesus told them that, look, the time is coming, the time is now, that those that worship God will worship him in spirit and in truth. Okay? So you don't necessarily have to go to Jerusalem or the mountaintop. They went to the mountaintop to go and worship. He said you don't need to go or do those things. So that means that wherever you are, when you gather, you can do it. But if we say that we have to put up a building, and because of that building, once we put it up, then God is going to hear our prayers, especially when we have a presidential candidate, now the former trade minister, Alain Chermatin, saying that, look, it is arrogance of power and corruption that is impeding the progress of the country. Then are we not putting the cart before the horse? But there are things that need to be done. Cracking the whip, not being a clearing agent, making sure that bodies or institutions that are supposed to scrutinize things are scrutinizing and making sure that people are doing whatever they're supposed to do. But well, so what do you think? I wouldn't have enough time to talk about this, but it looks like the arrogance of power has been a major obstruction to progress in our country. Former Trade Minister Alain Chermatin has said. He stressed that leadership is an opportunity. Leadership is an opportunity to serve the people and not to lord it over them. Adding that in servant leadership, humility is an asset and not a weakness. The former minister said this in his televised address to the nation on Tuesday, 10 January 2023, where he officially declared his intention to contest as flag bearer of the new patriotic party. He also admonished the nation's leaders against corruption and petty theft or thievery, particularly from the public purse, saying this will deny our country the benefit of utilizing its tax revenue and other resources for the development of our country. Well, interestingly, we think that the panacea to all the problems that Ghana has is this cathedral, the National Cathedral, and once we build that, everything is going to be fine. How many church buildings don't we have here in the UK? Talk about America, the US. What about Italy? But has that stopped in any way, shape, or form whatever is going on there? No, because you have to crack the whip. So just having a church building will not be a panacea to your problems. I don't know, but well, I think we'll talk about that tomorrow, God willing, once we come on. Maybe I'm looking at it from a different point of view, like the 10 blind men of Hindustan who went to see an elephant. Depending on where you are standing, you can describe the elephant. One who stood at the side of the elephant was saying that the elephant feels like it's like a wall. The one who held the tusk of the elephant was saying that the elephant is like a spear, and the one who held the nose was saying that the elephant is like a snake. Well, so what do you think? We'll be talking more about it tomorrow, God willing. But now, let's move on quickly to other parts of the world. We have a look at some of the stories making the round before I take you straight to the House of Parliament for the Prime Minister's question time. MP Andrew Bridgen has suspended by Conservative Party for spreading misinformation about COVID vaccine. The Chief Whip has said. I'll be bringing you more about that. Well. Okay, now moving on straight to some international, some other stories making the rounds in other parts of the world. 6 have been injured. 6 people have been injured in Paris station stabbing attack. The attacker was shot, several times. It says the Interior Minister Gerald Demanin said the man was stopped by 2 off-duty police officers who were returning home from a shift. He said the suspected attacker was shot 3 times and taken to hospital with serious injuries. Authorities are trying to establish if there was a motive for the attack. The attack took place at 0642 hours, that is 0542 GMT. Within 1 minute, all 6 people were injured and the attacker was stopped. Mr. Damien thanked the police for their brave and effective intervention, which said saved many lives. Okay, we'll be telling you more about that as the day unfolds. Well, and yes, once I was on air, I saw this information. They feeding me with this information. Many U.S. flights are delayed due to a glitch with the National Control System Notice to Air Mission System. The Federal Aviation Administration says it is working to restore the system that alert pilots to potential hazards on flight routine routes following an outage across the country. In a statement, the FAA said operations across the nation's national airspace system are affected. So if you're embarking on a trip to the US, I think I don't know whether you will be able to take off now, or the airline will wait for a bit of clarity from there before you take off. But whatever it is, make sure you continue. You check before you leave. Well, a controversial Catholic cleric, Pell has died. Age 81. The Australian cardinal conviction on a child abuse charges was quashed on appeal, shocked the church, but he has now passed on. So coming your way from Starr Radio UK. Now, one other story. Now, Brazil riots, arrest ordered for top officials after capital stormed. Now, Brazil judicial authorities have ordered the arrest of top public officials after rioters stormed key government buildings in Brasilia. One official, the former commander of the military police, has been arrested, local media has said. The officials also include Brasilia former public security chief Anderson Torres and others responsible for acts and omissions leading to the riots, the Attorney General's office has said. Mr. Torres denies any role in the riots. Now, Colonel Fabio Augusto, the police commander, was dismissed from his role after supporters of ex-president Jair Bolsonaro stormed Congress, the presidential palace, and the Supreme Court. The rioting came a week after President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, widely known as Lula, was sworn in. The dramatic scene involved thousands of protesters, some clad in yellow Brazil football shirts and waving flags, who overran police and ransacked the heart of the Brazilian state. And I think they need to crack the whip like no man's business. All right then, it's all Starr Radio UK. It is your favorite African and Caribbean radio station in London. 5 minutes to the top of the hour. Your favorite African and Caribbean radio station in London there. Now, soon after first summer in first PMQ of 2023, and I will take you straight there in the next few moments. But Harry has condemned dangerous spin on Taliban comments. It's one of the stories making the round. He was responding for the first time to the coverage of his book. But well, I don't have enough time to go into details to tell you more about what he meant by that. But he made a statement. Somebody said, well, you're saying that the press has spinned the whole thing out of control, and that seemed to... Is that why the the Taliban leaders were saying or speaking against it? Well, more going to be coming your way. The Tory MP has been suspended. Andrew Bridgen has been suspended as a Tory MP for spreading misinformation about COVID vaccination. It comes after the Northwest Leicestershire MP posted tweets that compared vaccines to Holocaust. Now, Tory Chief Whip Simon Hart said the comments had crossed a line and caused great offense. He said Mr. Bridgen will lose the party whip, meaning he will sit as an independent while a formal investigation takes place. As a nation, we should be very proud of what has been achieved through the vaccine program, Mr. Hart added. The vaccine is the best defense against COVID that we have. Misinformation about the vaccine causes harm and costs lives. Mr. Bridgen is currently serving a 5-day suspension from Parliament for breaching parliamentary rules on registering financial interest. Well. Woo! You remember him? I rest my case. All right then. Now, a final story, and then we move on. Okay, a couple of them. Uranium in a cargo sparked alert at a Heathrow airport. Now, counter-terrorism officers are investigating this the shipment, which originated from Pakistan. Now, the final story pertains to Shamima Begum. Well, it seems to be changing the story from time to time. I don't know who her advisors are, but Shamima Begum has said she accepts that she joined a terror group when she fled Britain as a schoolgirl for Islamic State, and said she understands the public anger towards her. In an interview spanning more than a year, Ms. Begum, who was stripped of British citizenship as a national security risk, revealed that she was fed detailed instruction by IS members, but also undertook her own planning for the journey in 2015, giving her first full account of her flight to Syria, that she had been relieved to make it out of the UK, and said that when she left, she expected never to return. Ms. Begum has said she knows the public now see her as a danger, as a risk, as a potential risk to them, to their safety, to their way of living. But she said that I am not this person that they think I am. How would they know? Now, Ms. Begum is the best known case among thousands of men and women and the children who have been held in Syrian detention camps and prisons since the IS Caliphate was defeated in 2019. Many came from countries that do not want them back. Now, the 23-year-old who had 3 children in Syria, all of whom died, is in a legal battle with the British government to try to have her citizenship restored so she can return to London. And that is where I bring the program to a close for today. The first part, of course, I'll be taking you straight to the House of Parliament for the Prime Minister's question time. So wherever you are, we will be taking you there in a moment. Stay tuned. Don't you go away. Starr Radio UK, your favorite African and Caribbean radio station in London.
And you're still, and the Honourable Lady still needs some assistance, please do contact me. I'm happy to meet her to discuss it further.
Minister Liz Twist.
Speaker, one of the reasons families in Scotland are paying some of the highest electricity bills in Europe is because of 13 years of failed Tory and SNP energy policies. Scotland is a key contributor in delivering a secure, affordable, low-carbon energy system for the whole of the UK. Under Labour's proposals, we would lower bills for Scottish households and be energy independent, with a plan for clean power by 2020. Now, the former Conservative Energy Minister, Claire Perry, says Labour are serious about Britain's energy crisis, unlike my former party. Does the Minister agree with his former colleague?
Mr. Speaker, I do not agree with the Honourable Lady's analysis. This government remains committed to ensuring the UK has a green, secured energy supply, which I do agree with the Honourable Lady's assessment of the SNP's failings, and we saw that yesterday in their botched energy statement to the Scottish Parliament.
Cheers for Ronnie.
Mr. Speaker, I trust the honourable gentleman recalls that this House overwhelmingly rejected the motion to which he refers to, because this government is focused on delivering for the people of Scotland. That means helping tackle on the cost of living, protecting our long-term energy security and growing our economy.
This place, the Secretary of State for Scotland, while explaining the UK government's lack of appetite for a referendum on Scotland's place in the United Kingdom, repeated many times the route to referendum in 2014 involved consensus between the governments. Given that democracy is fuelled by consensus, is the Secretary of State for Scotland working towards establishing that consensus, or is he content to deny the people of Scotland their democratic voice?
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State for Scotland and this government will continue to work with the Scottish Government to deliver on the priorities of the people of Scotland. That is dealing with the cost of living, that is dealing with the NHS, that is dealing with our education system, and a long list of other issues which the Scottish Government are completely failing to deliver on. It is certainly not another independent referendum.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretation proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We start with questions to Prime Minister. Cat Smith.
Question number one, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
There are no NHS dentists taking on patients in Lancaster and Fleetwood, and for those constituents of mine lucky enough to have one, they're waiting months for an appointment. So can I ask the Prime Minister how long he had to wait for his last NHS dentist appointment?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as a result of the new reformed NHS dentistry contract, there are now more NHS dentists across the UK with more funding, making sure people can get the treatment they need. But, Mr. Speaker, let me answer the lady directly. I am registered with an NHS GP. I have used independent healthcare in the past. I'll answer her question. I am registered with NHS GP. I have used independent healthcare in the past, and I'm also grateful to the Friarage Hospital for the fantastic care they've given my family over the years. But the the truth is, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to come from an NHS family, and that's why I'm passionately committed to protecting it with more funding, more doctors and nurses, and a clear plan to cut the waiting list.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You are 24 times more likely to become a doctor if a parent is a doctor, 17 times more likely to become a lawyer if a parent is a lawyer, and there is a lower proportion of disadvantaged young people being admitted to degree-level apprenticeships by employers than to degrees by universities. So I warmly welcome what my right honourable friend set out last week about education and family. But does he agree with me we also need our universities, employers and professions playing their part to improve social mobility in the UK?
Well, Mr. Speaker, everyone should have the opportunity to succeed, and my honourable friend is absolutely right that we all have a part to play. That's why I'm pleased the Social Mobility Commission is working to provide new information to young people about the opportunities available to them, but also a toolkit for employers so that they can also play their part in improving social mobility.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the 13 years of the last Labour government, there were no national NHS strikes. If the Prime Minister had negotiated with the nurses before Christmas, they wouldn't be on strike. If he'd negotiated with the ambulance workers, they wouldn't be on strike either. So why is he choosing to prolong the misery rather than end these strikes?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've always been clear that we want to have constructive dialogue with the unions. That is also why, when it comes to the issue of pay, we have accepted in full the independent recommendations of the pay review bodies. But now, the honourable gentleman simply doesn't have a policy when it comes to this question. If he talks about wanting to end the strikes. The question for him is simple then. Why does he not support our minimum safety legislation? We all know why. We all know why, Mr. Speaker. It's because he's on the side of his union paymasters, not patients.
Mr. Speaker, when I clap nurses, I meant it. His response to the greatest crisis in the history of the NHS is to threaten to sack our nurses. His Transport Secretary says it's not the solution. His Education Secretary hopes it won't apply in schools. His own assessments say it could increase the number of strikes. The simple truth is you can't legislate your way out of 13 years of failure. Between 2010 and 2019, before anyone had heard of COVID, Prime Minister, the number of people stuck on the NHS waiting list doubled. Why do patients always wait longer under the Tories?
Whoa. This is the new year. I want to start off with the refreshed chamber, but certainly not by interruption. Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he talks about the minimum safety legislation. Let's just talk about it a little bit further, because this is a simple proposition that no one denies the union's freedom to strike, but it is also important to balance that with people's right to have access to life-saving healthcare at the same time. Mr. Speaker, this shouldn't be controversial. This shouldn't be controversial. The International Labour Organization supports minimum service levels. We have they're present in France, in Italy, in Spain. Normally, he's in favour of more European alignment, Mr. Speaker. Why not now?
Mr. Speaker, they've gone from clapping the nurses to sacking the nurses. It's that simple. And to add insult to injury, they're the cause of the crisis. His government commissioned a report on waiting times. He knows this. His own report says this is not a COVID problem, it's 10 years of managed decline. As a result, 7.2 million people are now waiting for treatment. He says he wants to be held to account over that. So let's be very clear. Is his promise merely to get those numbers back to where they were before COVID, that's 4.6 million, or back to where Labour had them in 2010, almost half of that? Which is it?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, again, let's just start with the facts. The honourable gentleman seems to completely ignore the fact that not just in England, but in Scotland and in Wales and in many other European countries, COVID has had an extraordinary impact on health services. Now we have a very clear plan to bring the waiting list down, and it's one that the NHS supports. But I tell you what the NHS doesn't need. What they don't need is Labour's idea. What they don't need is Labour's only idea, which is for another completely disruptive, top-down, unfunded reorganisation buying out every single GP contract. Now, these aren't my words, Mr. Speaker. The CEO of the Nuffield Trust said it will cost a fortune and it's out of date, just like the Labour Party.
Mr. Speaker, so he can't tell us how much he'll reduce waiting lists by or when. So much for accountability that he wants. As ever with this Prime Minister, you scratch the surface and you find there is nothing there. Last month, 1.4 million people waited more than 4 weeks for a GP appointment. When Labour left government, you were guaranteed an appointment in 2 days. When does the Prime Minister expect to get back to that?
Well, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to waiting lists, we've already eliminated 2-year wait lists, done last year. We're on track this spring to eliminate those waiting 18 months, with a clear plan to go further, to eliminate those waiting 52 weeks by next spring. And we're doing that with record funding, more community diagnostic centres, more surgical hubs and more patient choice. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I've made tackling wait lists one of my 5 priorities. But what are his? They seem to change every single week. That first, he was against NHS outsourcing. Now, he's apparently in favour of it. He's inconsistent, unprincipled, and in hock to his union.
I wonder if Order. Can I just remind the Prime Minister, it's Prime Minister's questions, not opposition questions. Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard the Prime Minister saying he's now registered with an NHS doctor, so he'll soon enjoy the experience of waiting on hold every morning at 8 a.m. to get a GP appointment. But I can tell him that those that are waiting now don't want another round of empty promises or boasting about what he's done. They just want to know when they'll be able to see a doctor. And this is not just about routine care. There could be nothing more terrifying than being told you might have cancer. That's why the last Labour government brought in a guarantee you'd been seen by a specialist within 2 weeks. Today, 50,000 people are waiting longer than that. 50,000. And everyone in this House will appreciate the anxiety that they're feeling. So when will cancer patients once again get the certainty of quick care that they got under Labour?
Mr. Speaker, why is there a challenge with cancer times right now? I tell you, again, it's just absolutely no understanding of the situation, Mr. Speaker. What happened to cancer referrals during COVID? They went down by almost 2/3, Mr. Speaker. That was because of a pandemic that they went down. And by the way, if we had stayed and listened to him, we'd still be in lockdown and there'd be a bit more waiting list, right, Mr. Speaker? But actually right now, there are record levels of cancer treatment as we catch up with those missed things. But he talks about what's terrifying, Mr. Speaker. What's terrifying is right now. What's terrifying is that right now, people not knowing whether when they call 999, they will get the treatment that they need. Now, Mr. Speaker, in Australia and Canada and the US, they ban strikes on blue light services. We're not doing that. All we're saying is that in these emergency services, patients should be able to rely on a basic level of life-saving care. Why is he against that, Mr. Speaker?
There's not a minimum level of service any day because they've broken the NHS. And he's not promising that people would get to see a doctor in a few days like they did under Labour. He's not promising that cancer patients would get urgent treatment as they did under Labour. He's not even promising an NHS that puts patients first like it did under Labour. No, he's promising that one day, although we can't say when, their record high waiting list will stop growing. And that's it. After 13 years in government, what does it say? But the best they can offer is that at some point they might stop making things worse.
Right, Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the NHS, it's crystal clear. The Conservatives on the side of patients, Labour on the side of their union paymasters. But, Mr. Speaker, I've laid out my priorities for the country. Waiting lists down, inflation down, debt down, growth up, and the boat's stopped, Mr. Speaker. All he does is flip from one thing to another, and that's the difference between him and me. He's focused on petty politics. I'm delivering for Britain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of my constituents in Truro and Falmouth, actually, I would like to thank all of the health and social care professions in Cornwall for all of the hard work they're doing in a particularly difficult winter. In Cornwall, we don't get any respite in the summer because everybody comes to Cornwall for their holidays, which is brilliant. So there is no respite in the summer or the winter for our health and social care professionals. And in addition to that, Mr. Speaker, when we're trying to recruit people into social care, which is a vocation, they are competing with hospitality. And I would like to ask my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, whether he is aware of these extra challenges that places like Cornwall face in recruitment and retention.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to shine a spotlight, and I share with her and be incredibly proud of all our social care workers for the commitment that they have to their profession. And that's why many of them will benefit this spring from an almost 10% increase in the national living wage, putting an extra £1,600 in their pay slips. But also, we want to make sure that they feel valued with correct professional development, training and career progression, and the £500 million investment we're putting into the social care workforce will do exactly that for hers and other workers.
We now come to the leader of the SNP, Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, the longest and deepest recession in the entire G7. Brexit, 13 years of Tory rule. The energy price crisis, inflation and interest rates. If the people of Scotland are to do the math, as the Prime Minister so hopes, will they not come to the conclusion that this union simply doesn't add up?
Well, I'm pleased the honourable gentleman brought up energy, and he's right to do that, because energy, and when it comes to the economy, is incredibly important to Scotland's energy, and actually Scotland will play a fantastic part in helping us transition to net zero. But what we do now know is that the Scottish Government don't want to support Scottish energy industry and the 200,000 jobs that it produces. I'm keen to work with the Scottish Government to support the North Sea, because it's something that we're all very proud of in the United Kingdom.
But Mr. Speaker, if he wants to talk about the fact that Scotland is energy rich but fuel poor on Westminster's watch, I am more than happy to do so. But for today, let's reflect upon numbers, and in particular those numbers which were shone a light on by Sam Coates of Sky, in particular those in relation to the Prime Minister's favourite potential successor, which showed that over the course of 4 months, from 4 speeches, he raked in excess of £1 million. Does the Prime Minister not find it utterly perverse that senior members of the Conservative Party are feathering their nest in this way, whilst at the same time seeking to deny working people the opportunity to strike for fair pay?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think we need to talk about our predecessors, but I think it was one of his predecessors that did indeed work for Russia Today, if I'm not mistaken. But what I would say is, he talks about the priorities. Yesterday the SNP spent time talking yet more about independence at a time when we should be talking about delivering for people across the United Kingdom, focusing on their jobs, improving the NHS across the UK, in Scotland as need, as in everywhere else. That's the kind of thing I want to talk to the Scottish Government about, and I hope that he'll work with me to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
record of supporting the UK steel industry. So can I thank my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, for the work that he has already done for steel. He will know that steel is a vital strategic industry. It is essential for everything we do, from defence to growth. So can I ask him, will he do everything he can to ensure that we're always able to make steel in this country? And does he agree with me that steel is always safest under a Conservative...
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is a fantastic champion for the steel industry, and this government remains committed to a thriving UK steel industry. That's why our support for steel includes almost £800 million in relief for electricity costs, and steel companies are eligible to bid for up to £1.5 billion in capital grants to speed their transition to net zero steel production.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
I'm sure the whole House will wish to join me in wishing all the best to Gareth Bale, the former captain of the Wales men's soccer team, who's been a national inspiration and took Wales to the Football World Cup. This Tory government attacks dedicated health and ambulance staff, but disruption from strikes is as nothing compared with the chronic disruption caused every day by their 13 years butchering of health budgets. Meanwhile, Labour's Health Secretary in Wales follows the Tory playbook, blaming patients themselves for the standards of their health. But the reality is this: health services in Wales suffer from a combination of mismanagement by Labour and a Westminster funding system which perpetuates poverty.
Yeah, indeed.
Out-levelling.
Prime Minister. Far too long. The Prime Minister must have got
Will he therefore commit to funding Wales in public?
Prime Minister, you can't go on forever, Liz.
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, let me join with the Honourable Lady as a Southampton fan. Gareth Bale, also a hero of mine as well, and I wish him well. But when it comes to funding Wales, it's as a result of the funding from Barnet that the Welsh Government receives around significantly more funding than the NHS in England, but also £1.2 billion of extra funding as a result of the autumn statement. And I'd say what I said to the Leader of the Opposition, this isn't about actually political point scoring. The NHS is under pressure in Wales, as it is in Scotland and in England, in large part because of the impact of a global pandemic, and she would do well to recognise that.
David, go in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, unlike parties opposite, including the Scottish National Party and even the member for Aberdeen South, I know my right honourable friend supports or recognises the critical role that oil and gas companies and their employees critically have in not only providing energy security but also the delivery of the energy transition to net zero. Can he therefore confirm that this government's this government's ongoing commitment to expanding on our carbon capture, utilisation and storage capacity, including the Acorn project in St Fergus in my constituency, and can he provide an update on the Track 2 sequencing?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is a fantastic champion and campaigner for this project. We will invest up to £1 billion to establish carbon capture and storage in 4 industrial clusters by 2030. We very much recognise the benefits of the Scottish cluster and the role it could play in decarbonisation, and we're progressing our track through, and we'll set out further details in due course.
Davis Jones.
Mr. Speaker, the Times recently reported that schools across the UK are in crisis as the effects of online influencer Andrew Tate's vile misogyny infiltrates our classrooms and society. Teachers are now having to develop their own resources to re-educate boys who are being brainwashed online by his deeply toxic messaging. The Prime Minister has been too slow to recognise this damage this is causing. What has he done? What is his government doing to tackle this misogyny, this incel culture and the radicalisation of young men in this country? And will he commit to giving teachers the resources that they need to address this problem head on?
Mr. Speaker, with regard to funding, we announced in the autumn statement £2 billion of extra funding for our schools. But I'm also proud that this government has introduced the world-leading, world-first online safety bill, which specifically improves protections for children and puts very strict obligations and penalties on tech companies for enforcing them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The
The Building a Brighter Future project at Torbay Hospital will be the biggest single investment in South Devon's healthcare services since the NHS was founded in 1948. Can you assure me the government's commitment to it remains unchanged?
My honourable friend is a fantastic champion for his local hospital and his constituents. I'm pleased to say that the new hospital scheme for Torbay is part of our plan to deliver dozens more hospitals by 2030. We remain committed to the delivery of that new hospital, and I'm pleased that his trust are talking to the new hospital programme team about how to progress those plans.
Alex Cunningham. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Taxpayers are set to lose tens of millions of pounds after the transfer of valuable public assets to two Teesside businessmen, all without a full and transparent procurement process. And a relative of one of those people is now benefiting from millions of pounds worth of scrap from the same Teesworks site. Will the Prime Minister launch an inquiry into these crony contracts? And whilst he's at it, tell his Environment Secretary to get serious about the environmental disaster of the Teesside Coast, which is linked to the site.
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman will already be aware, DEFRA already carried out a comprehensive, evidence-led investigation, considered everything robustly, and concluded that natural causes was most likely responsible for some of the things that we saw. But we recognise people want a thorough investigation of this issue, and DEFRA have confirmed that an independent panel will be set up to report quickly.
Philip Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Labour-controlled Bradford Council continually neglect the needs of Bingley and other parts of my constituency as they pour all of their money into their inner city heartlands. Therefore, my constituents look to the government in order to put right their failings. That's why the Levelling Up Fund is so important. So, will the Prime Minister insist that the Levelling Up Fund for Bingley, which has been submitted, which will also unlock many millions of pounds of private sector investment, will he insist that that bid is successful when the announcement's made in the near future?
What about mine? Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, unlike the Labour Council, my honourable friend is a fantastic champion for his constituents in Bingley. As I have told him previously, I can't comment on individual bids, but I wish him every success and will be following with close interest how it proceeds.
Caroline Harris.
Caroline Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister believe that over 40,000 interactions by either social media, email or letter regarding the poor customer service and working conditions at the delivery company Every warrants an investigation by the relevant government department? His ministers in Bays think not. But I'm sure the Prime Minister would want the general public to believe that he at least is interested enough in this problem to take action.
Prime Minister. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm aware that other government ministers have looked into this issue and are currently considering the matter at hand, and I'd be happy to write to her when we learn more about the situation.
The Bruce.
Speaker, does the Prime Minister agree that the right way to secure the best future for the British people is to deliver on the people's priorities and secure a strong economy?
Yeah.
And will he confirm that he will not make any unfunded spending commitments which would rack up billions of debt, as the party opposite have done in the last week?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. If we want to safeguard the future of our public services and make sure that our young people inherit a strong economy, we must be disciplined on spending and borrowing. She's absolutely right about no unfunded spending commitments. Unlike, as she says, the party opposite, at last count, £90 billion of unfunded spending commitments. It's the same old Labour, Mr. Speaker. They always run out of other people's money.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Less than half of Wakefield's children managed to see an NHS dentist last year. My constituent, Mr. Fakazai's 6-year-old daughter, has never seen an NHS dentist. She has 10 teeth, which are black with decay, and is often crying with pain. Her father feels helpless. He's called every dentist in Wakefield for a place, but hasn't managed to secure one. Over 25% of 5-year-olds in Wakefield already have visible tooth decay. So when will the Prime Minister stop dithering and take action to address our national dental emergency?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very sorry to hear about the case raised by the honourable gentleman. I'm happy to look into that specific one more closely. But as I said in answer to an earlier question, we have recently reformed the NHS dentistry contract, hundreds of million pounds of more funding and more dentists, which should make a difference around the country. But I'll write to him on the specific case.
Liz Ross.
Scotland's oil and gas industry supports 90,000 Scottish jobs, but yesterday Nicola Sturgeon's SNP government published plans calling for as fast as possible shutdown of the industry and an end to new exploration. These plans are naive and reckless and were previously described by the SNP leader in this House as crazy. So will the Prime Minister reaffirm his support for Scotland's oil and gas workers and the future of our industry?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, honourable friend is absolutely right. We know that we will have to rely on hydrocarbons for decades to come as we transition to net zero, and consuming oil and gas from the North Sea means less than half the carbon footprint of importing that same oil and gas, which is obviously makes sense to do it here and in the process support tens of thousands of jobs in Scotland. So I can reassure him that the Scottish oil and gas industry has this government's wholehearted support.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Tory crisis in the NHS includes ophthalmology, the largest and busiest outpatient service. There are more than 650,000 people waiting to see an eye care specialist. Will the Prime Minister back my bill calling for a national eye health strategy that would ensure that nobody waiting to see a specialist will go without and potentially lead to a complete loss of sight?
Prime Minister. Can I thank the honourable lady for her campaigning in this area, and we are taking action to improve things. Over the past 5 years, the National Institute for Health and Care Research has invested more than £100 million to support research into eye conditions, but I know that there's more we can do, and my honourable friend the Minister, I believe, is sitting down to talk to the honourable lady in due course, and I look forward to hearing about those comments.
Duncan Smith.
Speaker, today I and others met with Sebastian Lai, the son of Jimmy Lai, who languishes in prison, the ex-owner of Apple Daily. I remind my right honourable friend that he is a British citizen and a British passport holder, and he now faces a trial at the end of the year in which he can be incarcerated under the new national security laws for life. For what? For publishing truth to power. Will my right honourable friend please now direct the rest of his government, particularly the Foreign Office, now to warn the Chinese government, if they persist with this, he, and alongside the Americans who have already done this, will threaten that the use of common law in Hong Kong will be taken away.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend speaks with authority on these issues, and I thank him for his continued engagement on this critical issue. He knows the actions we have already taken with regard to Hong Kong, not least providing refuge for hundreds of thousands of people here, and being robust in standing up to what we believe to be Chinese aggression and indeed an undermining of the settlement that we fought so hard to achieve. He has my absolute assurance I will continue to remain engaged and robust on this, and I look forward to sitting down with him to discuss this particular issue in more detail as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Half of British women and a fifth of men have been sexually harassed at work or a place of study. The government's own figures show that 41 of those said their perpetrators faced no consequences. Thanks to cross-party and government support, my private member's bill, which has now passed committee stage, will bring about a culture change to protect workers from harassment and sexual harassment, both from fellow employees and third-party individuals. Will the Prime Minister join me in celebrating the cross-party work on this important change in the law, and by personally supporting its aims and objectives and ensuring its safe continued passage through this Parliament?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank the honourable lady for her important work on this issue? And sexual harassment has absolutely no place in the workplace, and everyone should be able to feel safe at work. Now, of course, we need to make sure that legislation doesn't have unintended consequences, but I know she is meeting with my right honourable friend, the Minister for Women and Equalities, to discuss her bill further, and I look forward to hearing her progress on that meeting.
Matt Hancock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the disgusting anti-Semitic, anti-vax conspiracy theories that have been promulgated online this morning are not only deeply offensive, but anti-scientific and have no place in this House or in our wider society.
Prime Minister.
Well, can I join with my right honourable friend in completely condemning those types of comments that we saw this morning in the strongest possible terms? Obviously, it is utterly unacceptable to make linkages and use language like that, and I'm determined that the scourge of anti-Semitism is eradicated. It has absolutely no place in our society, and I know that the previous few years have been challenging for the Jewish community, and I never want them to experience anything like that ever again.
Final question, Nadia Witt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a 95-year-old constituent of mine spent 41 hours in A&E. When will the Prime Minister admit that the NHS is collapsing because of 13 years of underfunding and do something about it instead of blaming the nurses striking to save it?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear about the experience of the elderly constituent that the Honourable Lady raised, and my sympathies go out to her. But this is not about blaming anybody. This is about recognising that the NHS, whether in Scotland, whether in Wales, where it is run by the Labour Party, whether here in England, is facing pressure as we recover from a pandemic. The right thing to do is to have a clear plan in place to work with doctors and nurses to ease that pressure. That's what we're focused on doing, and that's what our plans will deliver.
Right, that completes Prime Minister's questions. We'll just let the chamber clear. Right, let us come to the 10-minute rule bill. George Eustace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to reduce the duty charged on renewable liquid heating fuel, to provide for the imposition of obligations on suppliers of heating fuel in relation to the supply of renewable fuel, and for connected purposes. And, Mr. Speaker, while no 10-minute rule bill can obviously compete with Prime Minister's questions for the attendance of honourable members, I have to say that I've been heartened by the extraordinary expressions of support that I've had for this proposal legislation from honourable members on all sides of the House. And in addition to those who've agreed to sponsor and take forward the bill, there are others too who've offered support in taking this forward, including my right honourable friend, the member for Ludlow and chair of the Environmental Audit Committee, my honourable friend, the member for North East Bedfordshire, and of course my honourable friend, the member for Innismorn as well. And Mr. Speaker, it's no surprise that this bill should have such support, for there are now 1.7 million homes in the UK that are off the gas grid, and around 1.1 million in Great Britain and a further 600,000 in Northern Ireland. And these homes are mainly in rural communities, and they mostly rely on kerosene boilers for their heating. And as we chart a course towards net zero, finding a low-carbon solution for these homes is going to be incredibly important. Now, in 2017, the government then introduced the Green Growth Strategy, and that concluded that there should be a concept of electrification first in respect of such homes. And this is a mantra that has been repeated in consultations since. And in 2017, the government also indicated that they wanted to seek to remove boilers from off-grid homes in these rural communities after 2026. Now, more recently, the Heating and Building Strategy in 2021 and two associated consultations on off-gas grid homes has also moved further and said that there should be a heat pump first strategy. Now, Mr. Speaker, what the government proposes is that from 2026, the installation of replacement boilers will be banned in those off-grid properties, and instead households will be forced in those rural communities to have either air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps. Now, Mr. Speaker, don't get me wrong. There is a role for both air source and ground source heat, and I'm a supporter of these technologies. Indeed, in Cornwall, we have a very impressive geothermal resource, and companies like Kenza, who are national market leaders in this technology. But for air source heat pumps in particular, there are some drawbacks, and it is a technology that is not right for everyone. The capital cost is very high. At around £12,000, it's at least 3 times the cost of a new boiler. In some coastal areas, the equipment can be prone to decay and rusting. And it also requires quite a lot of additional insulation in the homes. And with that additional insulation comes a lack of ventilation. And on some old properties, there is an associated problem with increased risk of mould and the health problems that come from that associated with that increased insulation. So the Renewable Liquid Heating Fuel Bill establishes, in my view, a better path towards decarbonising our energy in these off-grid homes, because the technology now exists to adapt existing boilers so that they can run not on kerosene but on hydro-treated vegetable oil, or HVO. And this is a renewable fuel derived from waste. The adaptation to the boilers is very modest. A small change to a nozzle, an adjustment in the pressure, sometimes cleaning the tank. The cost of the adaptation is no more than a few £100. And the government's own work in this area on their standard assessment for building energy efficiency, the so-called SAP document, their own document shows that switching to HVO as opposed to kerosene would lead to an 88% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, which would be an extraordinary achievement. Now, in my own constituency, the small village of Cahelland have been taking part in a very interesting and fascinating pilot organised by a local fuel distributor, Mitchell & Webber. And residents, the local school, the chapel have all taken part in this switch to the use of HVO. And having met them shortly before Christmas, the results really are quite fascinating. Typically, fuel consumption is around 30 to 35% lower than for kerosene. Residents reported slightly higher temperatures in their radiators. The local chapel made a very good point, which is that they only need heat intermittently when communities are using the hall. They don't want an air source heat pump running continuously to keep temperatures high. They want to be able to switch that energy off and on, and this is an ideal solution for them. Now, the government has long recognised the value of renewable fuels in the transport sector. We have the Renewable Transport Fuel Obligation, the RTFO, which requires fuel manufacturers and importers to purchase a proportion of fuel from renewable sources. This bill extends the RTFO mechanism to cover the use of renewable fuels in domestic boilers too, and it also removes the current duties from these renewable fuels, which are entirely counterproductive. Now, the intended impact of my bill is to reduce the cost of HVO so that it can achieve parity with kerosene. And if you get parity of cost with kerosene, and the cost of conversion is so modest, we will see a very rapid adoption of HVO. Exactly. And the key thing here is that if the government, in my view, were to target carbon emissions, then incentivising the use of renewable fuels becomes really quite obvious. But the challenge at the moment is that the government is not so much targeting carbon with its current strategy, it is targeting the adoption of a chosen technology. It has chosen a winner in air source heat pumps, and that is how it is measuring its success. And the real risk, I think, that the government faces with its current strategy is that people will put off the decision to make that huge capital expenditure in air source heat pumps. They will patch up their boilers and keep them going and replace parts when they might otherwise have replaced the whole boiler. And what that means is that the current strategy is unlikely to yield any results at all in terms of carbon reductions until at least Carbon Budget 6 in the mid to late 2030s. The great advantage of the proposal I have is that you will get a rapid uptake of HVO within Carbon Budget 4, literally within the next 4 years. And within those 4 years, you'll see a dramatic 88% reduction in our carbon emissions. And I would say, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, that if we are to meet our net zero ambitions and those crucial carbon budget staging posts in the meantime, both 4, 5 and 6, the key is to make this as easy as possible for people to make the change. And the easier you make it, and the more you put effort into making sure they don't need to change their way of life, the faster you get uptake. And the faster you get uptake, the quicker we get to net zero. So I welcome the fact that my honourable friend, the Minister, has listened to this. The government does have forthcoming responses to 2 consultations in this area, and it has a wonderful energy bill that is ripe for amendment, if I might say, and I look forward to it returning to this House. And I hope that my honourable friend, the Minister, will engage further in this. But for now, I commend this bill to the House.
The right honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. The question is, does the right honourable member have leave to bring in the bill? As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Sir Gary Streeter, Kevin Foster, Anne-Marie Morris, Mr David Jones, Jim Shannon, Ben Lake, Sir Mike Penning, Mr Robin Walker, Selene Saxby, Ian Paisley, Derek Thomas and myself, Mr Speaker.
George Eustace.